The first time I walked into Miltech Industries, I was 24 years old, fresh out of college, with a heart full of ambition and a brain humming with dreams. The office smelled like new carpet and stale coffee, and everything about it felt electric, alive. I remember clutching my thin leather briefcase, pretending I wasn't shaking. "You'll do great here," my college mentor had told me encouragingly. I wanted to believe it. Back then, Miltech wasn't the polished corporate behemoth it would later become. It was a rough, scrappy startup with faulty air conditioning, broken vending machines, and dreams far bigger than its tiny team could handle. But it was mine. From the first day, I threw myself into the work like a drowning man clutches a lifeline. I stayed late almost every night. I came in on weekends. I volunteered for every brutal, thankless project that no one else wanted. I learned the entire infrastructure inside and out. I wasn't just an engineer. I was the guy who fixed the server crashes at 3 a.m., who soothed angry clients on missed deadlines, who stood by my coworkers when others would have bolted. "You're a lifesaver," my boss, Jack, once laughed after I pulled an all-nighter to patch a massive security hole. "Just doing my job," I replied modestly, though my chest swelled with pride. Over the years, Miltech grew. We moved from the dingy fourth-floor office to a gleaming glass building downtown. The coffee improved. So did the paychecks, the benefits, the holiday parties. I watched kids fresh out of college join the company, starry-eyed like I had once been. And I trained them patiently, even when they rolled their eyes or dismissed my methods as old school. Jack wasn't just a boss back then. He was a mentor, sometimes even a friend. He would pull me into his office to brainstorm ideas, invite me to after-work drinks, introduce me proudly to investors as the man who keeps the wheels turning. "I don't know what we'd do without you," Jack said warmly one evening after a particularly brutal product launch. I believed him. There were sacrifices, of course. Late anniversaries, missed birthdays, friends drifting away after one too many. "Sorry I have to work" messages. But I told myself it was worth it. This was more than a job. It was a legacy. Something we were building together. I still remember the Christmas where the bonus envelopes were handed out. Mine was thin. Embarrassingly so compared to the golden promises Jack had made earlier in the year. When I hesitated, Jack clapped a hand on my shoulder. "We're investing it all back into growth," Jack said reassuringly. "You'll see your payoff soon enough." I nodded, forcing a smile. I wanted to believe him. Year after year, I told myself the same thing. The big payoff was just around the corner. My loyalty would be recognized. My sacrifices would matter. But slowly, things began to change. It was subtle at first. Jack started missing engineering meetings. New faces appeared in upper management, outsiders with cold smiles and pressed suits. They spoke in buzzwords, not solutions. They looked at spreadsheets, not people. Suddenly, there were consultants swarming through the office, clicking their pens and scribbling notes about optimizing resources and streamlining labor costs. The culture shifted. Where once there had been camaraderie and shared vision, there was now suspicion and polished slogans about efficiency plastered on every empty wall. I should have seen the writing on the wall. But loyalty is a stubborn thing. I still stayed late. I still picked up the projects others dropped. I still mentored the newcomers, even as they started to treat me like a relic. "Hey, you're the old guy who knows all the secrets, right?" A young hire joked one day at lunch, nudging me playfully. "Yeah, guess I'm the dinosaur," I replied with a chuckle, forcing it to sound light. Jack started canceling our one-on-one meetings. He was always too busy, or in back-to-back calls. I didn't want to bother him, didn't want to seem needy. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I should have made more noise. Instead, I trusted. Trusted that 18 years of dedication would count for something. I stayed through the merger with a larger tech firm. I stayed through the budget cuts. I stayed even when my workload tripled and my department was slashed to half its size, because I believed. "You've been with us since the beginning," Jack had said once with a proud grin, back when the future felt bright. I remembered that as I sat in my cramped office one rainy Thursday morning, staring at the meeting invite that had just popped up on my calendar. Subject line: Organizational Changes Discussion. I clicked on it, frowning. Only my name and Jack's. Maybe it was a promotion, maybe a new project, maybe, finally, some long overdue recognition. I smoothed my shirt, checked my reflection in the black mirror of my idle laptop, and headed toward the conference room, heart pounding. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush. The conference room was empty when I arrived. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow across the polished table. I sat down at one end, my palms slightly damp, and waited. A few minutes later, Jack entered, carrying a manila folder. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He didn't even meet my eyes. Something inside me tightened. "Hey, Jack," I said lightly, trying to break the tension. "Thanks for coming," Jack said stiffly. He sat across from me, laying the folder on the table between us like a weapon. "We've been reviewing all departments," Jack said carefully. "Okay," I said, frowning. He cleared his throat, flipping open the folder. A piece of paper slid out. Some HR form with my name typed neatly at the top. "Due to restructuring and the need to control expenses, your position is being eliminated," Jack said flatly. I stared at him, uncomprehending. "What?" I asked quietly. "You've been a valuable member of the team," Jack said quickly, like reading from a script. "After 18 years?" I asked hoarsely. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's just business," Jack said defensively. I leaned back, feeling like the floor had vanished under me. You told me I was part of the foundation," I said in disbelief. "You are," Jack said, wincing slightly. "Were. It's complicated." "No," I said sharply. "It's simple. You decided I cost too much." He flinched, but didn't argue. The silence between us thickened, filled only by the faint hum of the HVAC. "We're offering a severance package," Jack said, pushing a second sheet across the table. I didn't touch it. "How long did you know?" I asked, my voice low. Jack hesitated. "A few months," Jack admitted reluctantly. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound that startled even me. "And you let me work nights, fix all the disasters, mentor the new hires, while you planned this," I said bitterly. "I had no choice," Jack said, spreading his hands helplessly. "You always had a choice," I said icily. He looked away, staring at the wall as if it might rescue him. "We appreciate everything you've done," Jack mumbled. "No, you don't," I said flatly. I gathered the papers into a neat stack without reading them, and stood up. "Is there a final project you want me to babysit before I leave?" I asked sarcastically. "That's not necessary," Jack said awkwardly. "Of course not," I said with a bitter smile. "Wouldn't want the expensive guy touching anything important." He didn't stop me when I turned and walked out. I carried the folder under my arm like a shackle. My footsteps echoed down the sterile hallway, past rows of desks where younger employees hunched over laptops, oblivious. No one looked up. No one noticed. In the break room, I saw my old coffee mug still sitting on the shelf, a chipped thing with a fading Miltech logo. I hesitated, then left it there. It belonged to a different man. I packed my few personal items into a cardboard box. A couple of framed photos, a model engine I built during lunch breaks, a worn leather notebook filled with ideas that would never see the light of day. No speeches, no send-off party, no gold watch, just silence. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit me like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the gleaming glass building that had once felt like home. Now it just looked like a stranger. I set the box down on the curb and leaned against the lamppost, struggling to catch my breath. Across the street, life went on. Cars honking, people laughing, dogs barking. None of them knew. None of them cared. I pulled out my phone mechanically, staring at the black screen. No missed calls, no messages, no one waiting for me. I thought about calling my wife, my brother, my old college friend, but the shame rooted me to the spot. How do you explain losing not just a job, but 18 years of your life? A light drizzle began to fall, tiny cold needles on my skin. I let it soak through my jacket without moving. Finally, I picked up the box, cradling it awkwardly against my chest, and walked to my car. As I drove away from Miltech for the last time, I didn't look back. Maybe because deep down, I knew. It had stopped being my home a long time ago. I was just the last fool to notice. The first few days after I left Miltech were a blur. I woke up early out of habit, showered, shaved, even packed a lunch once before remembering I had nowhere to go. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. The ticking of the clock in the kitchen became unbearable, each second a tiny hammer against my skull. I tried to keep busy, organized the garage, repainted the fence, fixed the leaky faucet that had been dripping for months. But no matter how many chores I crossed off, nothing filled the growing void inside me. The real wound wasn't the paycheck. It was the betrayal. "You gave them everything," my wife said one evening, sitting across from me at the dinner table. "I thought it meant something," I said hollowly. "It did," she said firmly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. But it didn't feel like it. I applied for a few jobs online, but every time I clicked submit, it felt like another admission of failure. 18 years, and here I was, just another faceless resume in a sea of desperation. Weeks passed. I got a few polite rejection emails. Mostly I got silence. Meanwhile, Miltech rolled on without me, or so I thought. It started with a phone call from an old coworker, Greg. "You won't believe the disaster they're in," Greg said, almost gleeful. "What happened?" I asked cautiously. "The server migration you set up?" "They tried to overhaul it without you," Greg chuckled. "It crashed, took the whole client platform down for 2 days." I leaned back in my chair, a strange mix of emotions swirling in my chest. "They had to refund 2 major clients," Greg continued. "They're bleeding." I didn't know what to say. "Thought you'd want to know," Greg added. "Thanks," I said simply. I hung up and stared at the ceiling, feeling the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks: vindication. But it wasn't just one mistake. Over the next month, the stories kept coming. A product launch delayed because no one understood the integration systems I had personally built. Customer support in chaos because the knowledge bases were incomplete. Deadlines missed. Contracts lost. At first, I thought they'd figure it out. Hire consultants, patch the holes. Companies like Miltech didn't just implode overnight, but I had underestimated just how much of the invisible infrastructure had depended on me. And only me. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered warily. "Hey, it's Jack," Jack said awkwardly. I nearly dropped the phone. "How are you?" Jack asked lamely. "Busy," I said shortly. "Listen," Jack said, his voice lowering. "We were wondering if you could maybe consult on a few issues, just temporarily." I almost laughed. "You fired me for being too expensive," I said coldly. "I know," Jack said quickly. "But this would be a freelance thing, a short-term engagement. At half my original salary, right?" I said sarcastically. Jack hesitated. "Budgets are tight," Jack admitted sheepishly. I smiled grimly to myself. "Thanks, but no thanks," I said, ending the call. It felt good, really good. But it didn't end there. A few days later, an email arrived, then another, each one more desperate than the last. They didn't just want advice anymore, and they needed someone to fix the mess, someone who knew the systems inside and out, someone who could stop the bleeding, someone like me. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on building something new. With encouragement from my wife, I reached out to a few contacts outside Miltech. Smaller companies. Startups that valued experience over age, substance over style. Word spread quickly. Within a month, I had landed my first consulting client, then another, then two more. They didn't care about flashy degrees or trendy jargon. They cared that when something broke, I could fix it. Fast. For the first time in years, I set my own rates, chose my own projects, worked with people who respected me, and still the emails from Miltech trickled in. Finally, one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Jack himself. "Please, we're losing clients. We need you." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I thought about all the nights I had stayed late, fixing other people's mistakes, all the weekends sacrificed, all the promises broken. And I realized something. They hadn't fired me because I was too expensive. They fired me because they didn't think I mattered. They thought they could replace me with someone cheaper, someone younger, someone who looked better on a spreadsheet. They thought loyalty was a commodity, not a bond. They were wrong. I turned off my phone, set it face down on the table, and went outside. The sky was painted in deep purples and golds, the last light of the day stretching across the horizon. I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, listening to the crickets. For once, I wasn't chasing anyone. Not approval, not validation, not even revenge. I was just living. It happened faster than I expected. One rainy Thursday afternoon, while I was working on a project for a new client, my phone lit up with a barrage of messages. They weren't from Jack this time. They were from Greg, from some of the old team members still hanging on at Miltech. They're in full meltdown mode. The servers are down again, biggest client threatening to pull out, upper management pointing fingers. I read each message carefully, feeling a strange detachment, as if I were observing the slow-motion crash of a train I had once helped build. Then the call came. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said flatly. "Please, don't hang up," Jack blurted immediately. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "We need you," Jack said, his voice hoarse with desperation. "That much is obvious," I replied coolly. "There's no one else who knows the architecture like you do," Jack pleaded. I stared out the window at the rain dripping down the glass. "You should have thought about that before you threw me out," I said quietly. "I know," Jack said hurriedly. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake." I almost smiled at how bitterly satisfying it was to hear him say it. "What do you want, Jack?" I asked calmly. "We're willing to bring you back," Jack said eagerly. "Full salary? A bonus? Whatever it takes." I let that hang for a moment, savoring the reversal. "Why would I ever come back to fix what you broke?" I asked pointedly. "Because you're better than this," Jack said desperately. "Better than holding a grudge." I laughed, a low, humorless sound. "You think this is about a grudge?" I asked sharply. "This is about respect. Something you clearly never had for me." Jack went silent. "I'm offering you a real opportunity here," Jack said after a moment. "No," I said simply. "You could save the company," Jack insisted. "It's not my company to save," I said coldly. There was a long pause on the other end, just the sound of Jack breathing, ragged and panicked. "I can't do this without you," Jack admitted finally. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was too expensive," I said with a bitter edge. "Please," Jack whispered. For a long moment, I considered it. Not for them. For me. To stand in that office one more time, to feel the weight of every eye realizing they had underestimated me. But then I realized I didn't need that anymore. I had already won. Without lifting a finger. Without lowering myself. "I'm not coming back, Jack," I said firmly. "But we can work something out," Jack begged. "You made your choice," I said quietly. "Now you live with it." Before he could say anything else, I ended the call. My hand shook slightly, not from fear or uncertainty, but from the adrenaline of finally standing up for myself after so many years. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Greg. You won't believe it. News just broke. 2 major clients pulled out. Stocks are crashing. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the rain had eased, leaving the world clean and raw. I thought about the nights I spent alone in that building, saving projects, pulling dying systems back from the brink. I thought about the promises made and broken. I thought about Jack's panicked voice and the way it had cracked at the end. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt light. Not gloating. Not bitter. Just free. Weeks passed. The calls from Jack stopped. The emails from Miltech went silent. The desperate messages from old coworkers dried up like puddles after a storm. Every so often, I'd catch a headline online about the company's unraveling, layoffs, lawsuits, a full investigation into mishandled client contracts. But I didn't click. I didn't need the details. I already knew the ending. Miltech wasn't just dying, it was already dead. They just hadn't accepted it yet. Meanwhile, my life finally began to bloom. The consulting work grew faster than I could have predicted. Word of mouth spread quickly among smaller firms, startups, even a few mid-sized companies that valued someone who actually knew how to build things, not just talk about building them. I chose my clients carefully. No corporate buzzwords, no empty promises, just real people who respected real work. One afternoon, I sat across from a young CEO, barely 30, full of energy and ideas. "We're looking for someone to guide us," the CEO said earnestly. "Someone who doesn't just chase the next shiny thing." "You need stability," I said thoughtfully. "Exactly," the CEO agreed quickly. "We don't want to make the same mistakes the big players did." I smiled, feeling a rare warmth in my chest. "You're smarter than most already," I said genuinely. He laughed, and we shook hands. A real handshake, not the empty, cold ones I had gotten used to for so many years. Later that evening, I sat on the porch of my house, a cold drink in my hand, watching the sun slip behind the hills. My wife came out and sat beside me, handing me a second glass. "You look different," she observed with a smile. "Feel different," I admitted. "Proud of you," she said warmly. "Thanks," I said, squeezing her hand gently. We sat there in comfortable silence, the air sweet with the scent of cut grass and distant wood smoke. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. I glanced at it without moving. Another email from Miltech's HR department, probably another generic blast, another desperate plea for help hidden under layers of formality. I ignored it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I simply didn't care. The story of my life was no longer tied to them. They were the past. I was building something new. Something better. The next morning, I opened my laptop and pulled up my growing client list. New opportunities, new faces, new challenges. My calendar filled faster than I expected. It wasn't just work. It was freedom. I set my own hours. I chose projects that excited me. I spent weekends with my wife instead of under the fluorescent lights of an empty office. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had forgotten existed. The weight that had lived on my shoulders for nearly 2 decades, the endless expectation, the need to prove my worth, was gone. One afternoon, while cleaning out my old email folders, I stumbled across a saved message from years ago. It was from Jack, back when things were still good. "Thanks for saving the launch. Couldn't have done it without you." I stared at it for a long time, then quietly hit delete. Some things are better left erased. A few weeks later, Greg called. "You hear the news?" Greg said excitedly. "No, what happened?" I asked curiously. "Miltech's officially bankrupt," Greg said gleefully. "Filed this morning." I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle. "Wow, I said simply. You all right? Greg asked, his tone softening. Better than ever, I said truthfully. We chatted a few more minutes, then said our goodbyes. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet for a moment, absorbing the full weight of it. Closure? Not the kind you get with apologies or explanations. The real kind. The kind you find when you stop waiting for validation and start living for yourself. I glanced out the window at the world outside. Messy, unpredictable, beautiful. There were no guarantees, no promises, just the chance to build something better from the rubble. And this time, I wasn't building for someone else. I was building for me. Thanks for watching.